I've been mostly working on, really, to be honest with you, when the sun comes up, doing inventory operations because I am an entrepreneur and I need to take stock of what inventory I actually have on hand in order to make my store on the internet reflect the balance of goods and everything. And that's been mostly what I've been doing. And by night, watching the Apothecary Diaries and everything, just waiting for the sun to come up. And so I haven't had a moment to peel away to observe what my friends on social media were saying and everything and what was going on, but a lot of my people were reacting to the murder of Renee Nicole Good and everything. And so I myself, now, I'm not here to show you any video because I suck at video editing. Those are skills that I need to do research on figuring out how to do. So everything is just kind of haphazardly thrown together, on my own, just so that I can get social commentary out there and get my opinion known and everything. But you can look up the videos themselves. I found, in particular, I really liked one poster in particular who has been really apt at showing me, what happened. And let me figure out what her name is. It's like Brianna something. Just to give you the exact. So this is Brianna Perez, is the one that's covering this and everything, and she has a video that's, basically the ballistics look bad for ICE and everything. I don't actually believe that this was self-defense on ICE's part. Now, people have fired back at me, what would you do if a vehicle were coming straight at you and everything and you had a gun? And I'm going to be cold with you, hypothetically, about that one. I would jump out of the vehicle's way. I don't want to shoot somebody. The first thing I would do was get out of the oncoming vehicle's way, and then I would probably get behind another vehicle or something heavy, that the vehicle would have to crash into to get to me, so that the vehicle would be damaged before it could get to me. I would put something between me and it, and I would not bother shooting it. I would be trying to get out of the area entirely and away from the person rather than fight them. I would choose flight rather than fight in that situation. So don't sit here and fucking tell me this officer's life was in danger and all of this. But I did make some observations. The Young Turks, Anna Kasparian did a video where she, did some editing on it herself so that we could see the direction the vehicles, Renee's vehicle was pointing in, and what we can see is that the wheels start to turn to the right, and anybody that knows what happens from the outside of the car when you turn the wheel, the wheel will start to turn in the direction that you're turning the steering wheel in, because it needs to on the front side of the car in order to orient things in the direction you're trying to turn. Anyways, so what I can see is happening in this, the officers are firmly planted on the left side of the vehicle, and even the bullet hole that's coming in from the front side means that the ballistics for it mean that he has to be really, really far, on the left side of the vehicle, which means that he's only inches away from being behind, away and out of the path of the vehicle. And this is ultimately confirmed by the facts that you see on the video and everything, that she begins to turn, at first she starts heading to the left just a little bit, just long enough to get the wheel turning to the right, in this. And so she does this little arc movement. And so what we see is, as she begins to turn to the right, the officer who has a grip on the vehicle, a slight grip, begins to lose it and has to jump backwards, which only confirms the fact that, she was, even if he was, quote, in the front, unquote, as so many of the defenders have said, he was in the front and oriented to the far left side of the vehicle, which means that he can easily jump out of its path if it decides to move in his direction, which is what he should have done, rather than what he did. He was in no imminent danger in this situation and at no risk from the vehicle or being run over by it. He was in a position where, rather than taking a shot, he could easily jump to the other side. Also, it doesn't really make sense. If you believe that that vehicle is aimed straight at you, a rational person would not take a shot at that vehicle if they thought that vehicle was approaching them or turning to hit them, because their brain would already do the deductive processing in order to realize, hey, if I do that, that person, and I hit, that person will slouch over, their corpse will fall in such a direction that, their foot will just fall in the accelerator, and then that vehicle will end up there becoming an unguided vehicle that's heading straight towards me. They would know that, so they wouldn't take that shot. But that's not what the officer did, and maybe you could justify the shots that came in through the front glass, but he also took two more that were to the vehicle's side, which, at that point he had to be out of the vehicle's path to take those additional two shots. So we can say with confidence that those second two shots were completely inexcusable and unjustifiable. But furthermore, we have testimony from law enforcement officers all up and down at this point, saying that, their training basically tells them not to get in front of vehicles and everything. We have Supreme Court rulings that say that an officer is not allowed to shoot a vehicle that is fleeing from it. And so the defense that they're offering is about as paper thin as saying, imagine a bunch of people were on foot and one person the cops say, "Freeze, motherfucker," and the person flees in the other direction of the cop. Now, if the cop pulls out his pistol and starts shooting the suspect in the leg or the back and everything, and the suspect dies, that officer doesn't get to claim self-defense because, the suspects were fleeing from him. They weren't, and in this scenario, also, please understand that they have no weapons on them at all. So they're not firing anything back in their direction in this hypothetical. There's no aggression coming. They're just fleeing and nothing else. Now, if the cops shot them, it would be open and shut case of murder. The cop would be a murderer. They wouldn't be able to claim self-defense. How does a person that's fleeing from you pose any imminent danger to your life? Any imminent or immediate danger to you and your persons? But we know that this shot came in, far. Even the one that came into the front side of the vehicle was aiming, had to be aiming from the extreme left side of the front if it was in front of the car at all, which means it's a simple leap out of the vehicle's range to get out of its way, which means that this officer was easily able to get out of the oncoming vehicle's way, which means that he ultimately has a duty to retreat rather than use force, because he is still in a position where he's able to retreat rather than, basically the self-defense narrative is falling apart. And, I really can't wait until the ballistics come in on this one, because this man's going to jail. I would also like to point out that this is going to come up through the Minneapolis courts, if it comes up at all, in a city that's already, convicted cops before and everything. And regarding Trump's pardon and everything, well, you can't pardon somebody that was convicted in state court. They only have jurisdiction over federal convictions. So, if Minneapolis decides to prosecute him for murder, then he's gonna fry. He's cooked. I do not believe, from what I see in the narrative, that this was self-defense. And plus, if you're going to tell me that I'm stupid and, what would you do in this situation? What would you do if a vehicle would... No, sorry. I have done the critical thinking about this one. I already know what I would do. I would get out of the vehicle's fucking way. I would not take that shot.